Welcome, everyone. I am Marcia Sloan Latta. I serve as Vice President for Advancement, and we are delighted that you are here with us to hear from a very special guest. We have with us Jennifer Smith, Dr. Jennifer Smith, who did her pre-vet work here at University of Findlay, and she now is a very successful veterinarian in the healthcare field. And she also happens to be the granddaughter of Frank Capra and the daughter of Lucille Capra, who is a longtime English faculty member here. So we really appreciate, Jenny, you taking the time to be with us today and to share a few thoughts and remembrances about your grandfather. And the first question that I have is just to know a little bit of his biographical information, where he grew up, and how he got into the film industry.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to share this. This is a part of my life that's a big part of my life, but in some ways isn't, because to me, my grandpa was just my grandpa. So, as the youngest of a lot of grandchildren, there are 10 of us, I didn't get to know a lot about the work life of my grandpa. I really just got to see him as my grandpa as I was growing up. So to answer your question, though, I do know quite a bit about his history, just sort of things that my mom and her brothers have shared. So my grandpa was a very proud immigrant. He came from Bisaquino, which is a tiny little town in Sicily, which is another tiny little part of Italy. And he came over on a really rough freighter ride with his family. His older brothers had come to New York already and had kind of established themselves. And then his mother and father and the rest of the family came over. And my things about my grandpa that probably people don't really know are that he talks and describes very much coming into the New York harbor and seeing the Statue of Liberty, and just sort of like how beautiful she was and what a guide and beacon light she was, and how his father described to the family that she was like the North Star and that they were coming to this country. And so my grandpa was just an incredibly fiercely proactive American person. He very much believed in this country and everything that it stood for. And he was just so patriotic, which sometimes could seem sort of different because he certainly didn't originate from here, but he very much embraced living here. And then from there, they migrated. Eventually, they made it to San Francisco. And that's kind of where his more formative years were, in San Francisco with his family.
Great. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite memory of your grandfather, of time you spent with him?
I do. I mean, obviously a lot, like any kid with their grandpa, but I guess probably one of my most favorite that made me realize that he wasn't quite like everyone else's grandpas. There were many times that we would be, my grandpa and my grandma lived in California. And so we would go from Michigan to California in the summer quite regularly. And there were several times where my cousins and we would all be together there. So like I said, there's like 10 of us, and my grandpa would get out the reel-to-reel, like the real projector with the real reels of film, and say who wants to pick a movie. And because I was the second to the youngest, me and my cousin Monica frequently got to pick, and we would pick our favorites, and we would fall asleep right away because we were little people, but we would all crowd around and watch the movies. And I think it was pretty amazing. That's something that I will always remember. And I guess as I got older and then I realized who he was, I realized not everybody's grandpa made really great movies and then had a projector and played them for you. So that was pretty cool. And then certainly as I grew up, just having my grandpa, we lived in Michigan, they lived in California, but they came a lot to see us. And just those visits were just really magical because he was just a very unique person, not a very good driver. We would go to McDonald's and he called everything a sandwich. So, it would be, it's a burger, right? But or a hamburger, Big Mac or whatever, but he called everything a sandwich. And the other kind of funny thing about him is that he bore a very striking resemblance to Mr. Weatherby from the Archies. And so, he was bald and he had kind of the tufts of hair on the side. And so we called him Mr. Weatherby. And he just loved that, loved being Mr. Weatherby to us. And he would, come and, entertain all the neighbor kids that Mr. Weatherby was here. And so just memories like that. I realized that he was a very unique person, but he still was my grandpa. And incredibly supportive, certainly as I, grew up and just so involved in what we were doing, and so proud of us and just so supportive of whatever it is that we wanted to do. But those childhood memories are pretty strong, and that's probably what I remember most.
So tell us, how did he go from being an immigrant, then going to San Francisco, and then getting into movies? And how did he meet your grandmother?
Oh, sure. So he was in around San Francisco area, and they were his families were laborers. His father and older brothers. He was near the end of the line as well, like myself, and they were itinerant sort of fruit pickers. And I think his parents realized like the only way to really get ahead here is to go to college, is to get these younger two into some kind of formal education. And a lot of people also don't know that my grandpa went to Caltech. He's a very brilliant man. He went to Caltech and he studied engineering, chemical engineering. He was very much interested in that kind of thing. And at the beginning of the film industry, it was a lot of chemistry. It was a lot of making the image that you have shot, appear on the film. So there's quite a bit of chemistry to that. And at the time, what he describes is the reason he got into film was because that's where the jobs were. So I don't think he would ever carry around this message, that he was preordained to make these fabulous movies and tell these stories. I think it just really, really sort of happened. And he ended up, kind of working in that business because he was very technical, kind of on the techie end of it. And then that just kind of matriculated up to getting behind the camera, working the camera, and then really feeling like he had a story to tell, and then sort of telling it and having quite a bit of success early on with that, and then just kind of carried through. And most people at the time would say that's sort of how the film industry really grew. There wasn't film school. There wasn't, a lot of school for creative things back then. So a lot of people like my grandfather just sort of stumbled in the back door and then kind of matriculated into wherever their career paths sort of took them. And for him, it was about working the camera. And even later in life, it was about the camera and how it worked and how you could see something and get that image onto something that could then be shared.
So how did he meet your grandmother?
Oh, yeah. So on a blind date, they had actually scandalous. They had both been married before. My grandma was married to a really interesting man that was from a very affluent family, and he died when he was like 24 or something, right after they got married. And so she was working, and my grandma actually had gone to college as well, which just that wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And so she was working in an office near the studio, and my grandfather had been married to a woman, and they got a divorce, had no children, quickly got a divorce, and then somebody set them up on a blind date. And my grandpa says that the thing that, he always loved my grandma and the way she looked, but it was her voice that he said she had the most beautiful voice, and that's what drew him to her. Yeah. So
Right.
And they were very much in love. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Do you have any idea, did he ever say, or perhaps, through family lore or whatever, what his inspiration behind It's a Wonderful Life was?
Yeah. So the inspiration, and I don't know how well known this is, but the It's a Wonderful Life, the story was actually a Christmas card, and it was someone else's work, which was, fully credited. It was a Christmas card, and I'm blanking on the person who sort of saw it and then kind of made it into a short story, and that sort of passed its way up through to my grandfather. He had already had quite a bit of success in movies and telling the story of sort of this everyday man. And so whoever passed it along thought that he would do a really good job with it. So he definitely put it into life and, brought it to life, but he certainly didn't, it wasn't his original idea. And he, was very honest about that from the beginning. But I think the idea of taking this, and the part of the Christmas card was literally like just a couple sentences that then kind of morphed from there. So I think the inspiration was just seeing a really cool, interesting story of the everyday man that was pretty down. I mean, my grandfather really was for the little guy, and the person that was the underdog. And down on their luck, and really was about those heartwarming sort of stories of redemption. And so I probably think he probably saw that as a really great way to show that or showcase that.
I had never read or heard that before. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. From a Christmas card to this.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Incredible.
never know where your ideas might come from.
Right, exactly. Now I'm curious, when it's Christmas time, we're coming up on the holidays here. Do you watch that with your family and share any remembrances with your own children?
You know, I don't, we do, nowadays you can stream anything, right? But, growing up, it was on, one night during the month of December or something. So certainly if we knew it was going to be on, we would all call each other and say, oh, let's watch it. But ironically, it's really not something that is just sort of built in for, I think, anyone in my family. And I think just because we kind of lived it, and I don't know. The movie is fantastic, and obviously it is wonderful. I guess for us, there's just so much more to him and so much more behind it that it's not something that I do every year. But I certainly, if it's on, I will stop and watch it for sure. Yeah.
Great. Now tell us about your mother and her path to Findlay College.
Yeah, I think
How
that's
did she
that's
get
a cool
here?
story. Yeah, yeah. Oh, my mom is such a great lady, and she's doing great. She lives just in a little town just north of Traverse City, Michigan. She's doing great, by the way. Um, she my mom was married, and she and my dad had 6 children, and my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom had really pulled the family together, and she had been drugged from sort of town to town. We kind of pretty much lived, I'm told, in almost every big town city in the US, Big Ten city, because my dad would get a job and then he would lose it. And so my mom was sort of starting her PhD, and she'd have to kind of move and then start again. And so when they separated and divorced in very early, I was 2. We were living in East Lansing, and my mom said, this is it. I'm staying put. I'm making roots, and I'm doing this. And so that's the part of my grandpa I think that a lot of people don't know, in that he was definitely for the everyday man, but really behind that was the woman. And so he really was. If you look at sort of the characters in his film work, you will see that it really was about the woman behind the man. And so that played out really nicely with my mom. So, I mean, he was incredibly supportive. Without he and just his love and support of us for those years while my mom was finishing her PhD so she could, legitimately be a professor, we probably would have lived in a homeless shelter if it wasn't for his help. And so that is just such a part of him that he felt like it would have been very easy for him to say, nope, bring those kids home and we're going to raise them in Los Angeles and, all of that. And my mom said, nope, I'm doing this my way. And I'm obviously very thankful that she chose that path, and thankful that my grandma and grandpa were such a big part of that. And just not only, some financial support at the beginning, but certainly emotional support, and just always being behind us and always pushing us to be our best and to embrace what you're doing. So for my mom, that sort of morphed into her finishing her PhD, and she was teaching at Michigan State and really kind of feeling herself in her career, in her 40s, when most people were sort of doing that a little earlier in life. And then she really decided that she wanted to do more, and she wanted to be a part of something bigger and smaller at the same time. And so that's when she was recruited and took the job at Findlay as one of the deans. At the time, the title and the program that she oversaw was probably a little different than it is now and called something different. But so that's why she came. And I was a senior in high school, so I was a little bit not sure how this was going to go, but we could just see that my mom, my grandmother had just died, and we could see that my mom was finally sort of able to do something for herself. And, my grandpa said that this is the time. You need to go. You need to go and spread your wings and be this amazing professor and amazing leader that you've always wanted to be. And so that's how she got here. She looked in the Chronicle of Education and saw this job of, lifelong learning dean, I think it was called. And she said, I'm doing it. And it was close enough to East Lansing. So, it wasn't like she was that far away, and my mom still made all my sporting events, and I'm the youngest. So, I didn't feel like I was, missing her And she was just so proud to have a job and really to spread her wings and to be a part of Findlay College at the time. And she's just was so proud of the work that she did here in Findlay and everything that she got to accomplish and the colleagues. And I mean, for her, it was just sort of a complete dream come true. And it never would have happened if, my grandpa wouldn't have invested in her the way that he did. And we're very thankful, obviously, for that. So, and that's where her career kind of began and ended at Findlay.
Well, I've heard terrific things about her from both former colleagues of hers as well as former students.
Yes.
So
she's really great and had a real passion for that. Yep.
So, and I would love to have you share a few words with the audience with respect to, you now serve as a trustee on the Board of Trustees for the University of Findlay, which requires a great deal of volunteer time, and we deeply appreciate it. And you are a donor to the Findlay Fund at the level of President's Leadership Society. And of course, the people watching this are also all donors at the President's Leadership Society level. And so we thank you for your generosity. And I'm sure people would enjoy hearing why you give of yourself, of your time, of your talents, and of your treasure to University of Findlay.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you for that. For me, this is a no-brainer, right? I would not be where I'm at today in my career and in my life and my family and the choices that I've made without being at the University of Findlay. There's just, absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. So giving back is just the natural way to show that. Thankfully, I was raised in a family through my grandfather, my mom, my grandmother, all of them, to be generous when you can. And sometimes you can't always give the money, but you can give the time or advice or that sort of thing. And so I guess why I give is just kind of a no-brainer in that I just 100% believe in what is going on in that little town of Findlay, Ohio. It's just amazing. I look at, I went to another school for undergrad. The funny story is I certainly was not going to go where my mom was. And one of my sisters was at Findlay at the time, and I was not going to do that. So I went somewhere else and I got a fine education. But what I tell everybody is I had no vocation. I had absolutely no idea. I graduated with a biology degree and just said, okay, I don't know what to do next. No idea. And I had been thinking about being a veterinarian, but I was just so freaked out by how hard it was and all the rumors I had heard. So I just, thought I can't do that. And then I just really saw the doors open and, speaking to my mom about the program, I met Dr. Peck. My mom was smart and kind of, connecting me. And I realized, wow, this is the place. I should have done this all along. But it was a great place to come. I needed to take a year of physics because I hadn't taken that. So it was just really natural for me to come and do that. And I ended up staying longer than that because there were just so many other classes I wanted to take, and I wanted to get the pre-vet major, which, I needed to take more classes. So I was able to graduate with that. And I'm so proud of that and the connections that I made. And I would never have gotten into vet school, let alone be prepared for vet school, let alone go into vet school. The other thing that I think Findlay absolutely did for me was open my mind as far as there's a lot you can do as a teacher, as a nurse, as a veterinarian, as a doctor, whatever, that we prepare you for. But what Findlay helped me do was to see that within that veterinary job, there was a whole spectrum of things I could do within it. So I do something very unique. There's 1,000 of us in the country that do what I do. I absolutely love what I do. But I never would have been prepared for that if I had a closed mind. So I didn't just go to vet school as a robot from the University of Findlay. I went as a very prepared young woman that was able to see that, wow, veterinary medicine has a whole lot to offer. And I'm going to just pick this one thing that's kind of weird, but I think I'm open-minded enough to really do it. And so I think all that said, again, giving back is just sort of a no-brainer. And I just encourage others to do the same. And it's just something you have to build in, I think, to your culture too, and the stage of life that you're in. Sometimes $50 is all you can give, and some people can give 50,000. Everyone, falls on that spectrum, and everyone, that spectrum is going to go up and down all through life, right? You have kids in college, or, things happen like COVID, you just don't know where you're going to be. And so for Dave and I, we just have really that's been something that we have been able to really sort of just say, okay, let's set some money aside in this fund, and then we're able to use it as we, as we can. And so I guess for us, that's just what makes the most sense about giving. But as far as why I give and why I participate in things like this, even though I really strongly don't like pictures and video, I do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's just an absolute no-brainer. And I really say I have the opportunity right now to work with this wonderful recent University of Findlay graduate who went to vet school and is also doing a very alternative path. She's a regulator, so she works for the USDA. And so she comes to inspect and to, be the heavy to programs like mine. And so it's just so lovely to kind of talk to the next generation and work with her and see that here, however many years later, I'm getting older, this young person is coming along and she has the same energy and the same open-mindedness. So the program at Findlay, it works. And so that's why I give, because it works. So it's money very well spent.
Well, thank you. And
yeah,
thanks
of course.
for spending time with us today and sharing these terrific memories of your grandfather and of your mother. And we hope that everyone watching enjoys the program of It's a Wonderful Life as we prepare for the holiday season. So thank you so much, Jenny.
Of course. Thanks.